If you're no stranger to Twilight, which, let's be honest, many of us are not, then you'll be completely aware of the fact that the Volturi ruled over the vampire world, and they have done for millennia. They're the governing body who police the continent to make sure that the vampire community remain in order. If you step out of line, then you will most likely pay for it with your life. Now, the Volturi didn't get to the top by being elected by the vampires of the world or anything even close. They identified the position they wanted to be in, and they seized power. This didn't happen overnight, however, and despite their stated intentions of protecting the vampire race, there's probably not more an unforgiving, corrupt and sinister faction than these guys, and one of the reasons being is because they'd never allow it. There is a lot about the Volturi to discuss today, but the overhanging topic for the video will be, of course, to analyse and examine just how they became so powerful and what they did and have done to keep it. So let's go back to the beginning and strip down the Volturi coven to establish their journey to power. The Volturi Coven has existed for close to 3,000 years. Now, the exact age of the Coven has never actually been confirmed in the Twilight books, which I believe kind of adds to their mystique. Nobody really knows their deep origins. Many of its members are considered ancient vampires, or ancient ones as Carlisle Cullen describes them. They are some of the oldest known vampires in existence and have witnessed the rise and fall of many civilizations. However, despite their immense power and dominance, even the Volturi had to start somewhere, and they did, with 3 vampires known as Aro, Caius and Marcus. The Twilight wiki page states that they originated in Greece, but this isn't mentioned in the books, but my own assumption could be that this was later added by Stephanie Meyer in the Twilight official guide, so if you can shed some light on their exact origins, then please let me know in the comment section below. Aro, a vampire who was able to see every single thought a person has ever had by a simple touch, the lightest physical contact, met a vampire known as Caius. While Caius had no additional supernatural ability like Aro's, he had an incredibly strategic mind, was highly intelligent and extremely tactile in his decision making, something Aro found incredibly useful. Then they met Marcus, a vampire turned in his 20s with an unusual gift to be able to identify the strength of relationships, an ability that allowed the Volturi to understand and manipulate the bonds between vampires in other covens. With all 3 vampires offering an individual uniqueness to the coven, they set upon establishing themselves in a location where they could then target dominance over the world, Volterra, Italy. Volterra is steeped in history and is one of the oldest towns in the Tuscany region. Believe it or not, it actually does exist. It's not exactly known why they chose Volterra. My guess would be due to the fact it has been untouched through time, something the Coven seen their legacy reflecting. Aro, Caius and Marcus all took wives in Sulpicia, Athenadora and Didyme respectively, and the Coven increased to 6 members, although the wives were still looked upon as in need of protection. With the Volturi now settled in Volterra, Aro, Caius and Marcus now sought to increase the strength of the Coven in order to mount a sizable challenge on the current rulers of the vampire world, the Romanian Coven. While the Romanians relied on vampires with incredible physical strength for combat, Aro decided to take a different approach. He knew that adding vampires with supernatural gifts would fare a lot better, as it gave the Coven different dimensions of strength. He found Chelsea, who could manipulate the emotional bonds between individuals, enforcing loyalty if need be. This was crucial for Aro, as not everyone would wish to join the Coven. He bundled that ability with the power that Corin offered, which was a sense of contentment. Aro could keep the status quo quite easily with these 2 new members. It's noteworthy to remember that large covens were highly unusual at the time due to infighting over the uncontrollable desire of bloodlust when it came to feeding. However, Aro wasn't a fool. He still knew he needed raw strength on the battlefield, so his recruitment of Felix, an absolute immortal powerhouse, was more than necessary to balance out the overall strength of the Coven. Things went to new heights, however, when he came across two young children with psychic abilities as humans. Jane and Alec were considered too young to become immortals upon Arrow's first encounter with them, but he would monitor them until they became of age, dreaming of the outstanding vampires they would become if they already had powers as humans. He changed them when they were no more than 12 years old, sooner than he wanted to due to their powers being discovered and their lives put at severe risk, and they joined the ranks. Jane's ability to inflict an intense, mind-numbing, body-wrenching burn sensation all across the individual was utterly devastating, while her brother Alec's ability to project a black mist that severed all 5 senses was just as frightening. Together, the twins were the most offensively powerful vampires in existence. Arrow would continue this practice over the centuries, seeking only the most gifted of vampires to add to the Volturi Guard. If the vampire was already with the coven and refused Arrow's offer, it wasn't uncommon, or it didn't take long, for evidence of law-breaking to arise against said coven, resulting in them all being destroyed but one, and that was the individual Arrow originally wanted. Despite their somewhat cunning nature, the Volturi did believe in protecting the vampire race from all threats to their existence, the number one threat being, of course, humans. For all the power a vampire has, humans still outnumbered them 40 to 1 and, with the right approach, could have eliminated vampires from existence, something Arrow had always feared. He believed that the vampire race should live in the shadows and not expose themselves needlessly, inviting danger to their doorstep. Concealing their existence was a necessary step to ensure that they thrive as a species. However, they had one very large obstacle in their way: the Romanian Coven. The Romanians were the current rulers of the vampire world, and, most notably, they lived as kings and ruled openly, disregarding any perceived threat from humans. They were vicious, cruel, and their reign was quite tyrannical, something that infuriated Arrow, Caius, and Marcus, who, as I explained, had different views on how vampires should be governed. Nobody had even come close to defeating the Romanians for up to 7 centuries, but the Volturi were no standard coven. They had spent years recruiting the right vampires, and they worked as a unit, a chain, with each link from that chain offering a strength to the coven. And so began the Romanian Volturi War. The Volturi were highly effective in their use of vampires with supernatural gifts, as opposed to the Romanians' physically imposing vampires, destroying their ranks in a number of battles before finally usurping them and taking control of the vampire world. However, Vladimir and Stefan, the coven leaders, would not accept such a fate for their once great and powerful stature. In an attempt to take revenge and regain control, they gathered over 100 recruits and mounted their own attack. What they were not expecting, however, was the introduction of Jane and Alec to the war, something Arrow was holding off until the right time. The twins alone completely decimated the Romanian recruits with ease, putting an end to the latter's efforts for what was believed to be a certain victory. After the Romanians were dispatched, the Volturi finally took an unopposed, unchallenged seat at the head of the vampire community. With the Romanian threat behind them, the Volturi then began to shape the world in their image and implement their own politics as they established a new vampire government, a new power. Arrow and Caius were fully aware of how easy a coven of powerful vampires could seek to displace them, and therefore monitored the growth of covens around the world. They highlighted the ever-growing Egyptian coven as the next possible threat, due to the fact that they, like the Romanians, did not hide the fact they were vampires from humans and actually portrayed themselves as gods. They also had many wars for dominance against the Romanians too, which also showed their desire for power. Arrow identified gifted tracker Dimitri as the standout individual within the Egyptian coven and sought to add his unrivaled tracking gift to the Volturi ranks. They decimated the Egyptians as they did the Romanians, and the Volturi now had the most powerful tracker to ever exist, something that has not been matched since Dimitri's acquisition. Word spread quickly of the Volturi's dominance as they continued establishing their laws and rules for vampires to abide by. They continued adding gifted vampires to their ranks in order to strengthen themselves beyond the point of any plausible defeat. Aro, Caius and Marcus viewed every member of the Guard and Coven as irreplaceable. Everyone had a purpose. Every area had a strength, which means once you join the Volturi, you are more than likely not ever allowed to depart. The security of the Coven's prosperity was absolute. So absolute in fact that Aro even executed his own sister Didyme when she and Marcus were set to depart Volterra for a life anew. Caius ensured that all laws were upheld and had several scouts sent to areas of rumoured unrest and barbarian behaviour. No exceptions were made for anyone who defied the rules, coining the phrase, "The Volturi do not offer second chances." The Volturi have ruled the vampire world for up to 25 centuries by the start of the series. During that time, the Coven did a number of additional things to ensure stability in the world, including outlawing the creation of immortal children, cleaning up after the Southern Wars in the southern parts of America, and creating their own vampires to spread their laws across the world. If you enjoyed this video on the Volturi's rise to power, I do have a detailed video on the entire history of the Coven that you can watch by clicking the card right here. I also have an additional video on why Carlisle Cullen left and was allowed to leave the Volturi, contradicting what I just said about Aro not allowing members to depart, so make sure to check that out to see why.